folks. Welcome to Project Management Episode 6. We are on Episode 6, and thanks for the reviews. And really appreciate everybody listening. And don't forget to follow on Twitter at PM Hardcore, spelled at PMHARDCORPS. PM Hardcore. And follow me if you get on there. I know you don't, you can just get on there even if you're not if you don't have an account on Twitter, but just if you can, if you do, follow me and I'll follow you back, and it's easier to contact me that way. Appreciate everybody listening. And right now we've got folks listening, believe it or not, in Germany, Ireland, the Czech Republic, Iran, and Japan. Never expected that, but that's great to see. And a couple of reviews out there. Appreciate the reviews. Thanks very much. Like I say, I don't get anything out of this. I'm just doing it to help folks along because I've had so much experience with project management, and I've created certain techniques that make a huge difference. So let's have a quick review. If you can go to the Twitter site or not, I'll explain it. So obviously, if you go to the Twitter site, go to media and scroll down to E1, which is now pretty far down there, but not that far, but far enough. So we'll do a quick review, and then this particular episode is going to be about a project manager's philosophy, about management and about leadership. So scroll down to E1, and you can see there's the first thing you do. Of course, the first thing you do is the stakeholder list, right? You got to figure out a list of departments and with the people in those departments which you believe might be involved in your project, maybe in the scope of your project. And then you start calling people, and this is how you start building this list. And in this episode, we will discuss the core team, and I'll get back to this when we start that discussion. So here's your scope diagram, and that's just the demo I talked about in the second episode. And then you take all that, right? And you stop right there and you do your work breakdown structure. And the work breakdown structure, if you scroll up, that is WBS E1. Remember, when you do the scope diagram, you're asking people, what's in the scope? What's part of this project? And that's why you don't want it connected to the work breakdown structure when you're doing that, because you want to get folks in another state of mind, and the questions are, what are the deliverables in this project? What are we delivering? And everything from planning documents to training on a new product or new device, to all those things that have to be done, acquisitions, those are all deliverables, and you build the work breakdown structure. So once you've done that, and I remember we started with the stakeholder list and we built the scope diagram, and the next thing you do is you take the work breakdown structure and the scope diagram and you go back and forth between the two. Have the scope diagram on someone's workstation and have the WBS on another, and every time, either start with the scope or the WBS. I usually start with the scope, and someone says, okay, here's the scope bubble A. This is in the scope A. Find it in the deliverables. And they find it. I highlight A in yellow. They highlight the associated deliverables in the WBS, and we move on till it's all done. And obviously, what's not highlighted, you're going to start asking questions and talk about. It either comes out or it stays in, and you add something in one of the other diagrams. So that's how that goes. And then after that, what you do is obviously you define all the bubbles. And what I usually do is a table in Word with, I've got all the bubbles numbered in the scope diagram, and I put the definition in there that's in the scope diagram, and then I write a description of what that means. I define it again in obviously longer terms, a longer narrative, right? And then I put the references, if there's any references or memos or anything like that, and then who we initially think is going to be responsible for doing that, right? So that's all defined, and then we do the same thing with the WBS. So now we've gone back and forth, we've defined everything, and then if you look at, let's just say E5, which is second from the bottom, it should be second from the bottom in media on the Twitter account, then you copy all the bubbles into your second tab in Visio, and they're in a cluster below this, and you just keep moving them up to where they belong. So then you end up with your planning, your build 1, build 2, build 3, and that would be the first draft, right, of the plan. Now you could, you'll talk about this, you'll present it, and things may change, but it's easy. Click on the bubble, the circle, and move it. And you can go back and forth. Well, people can think of it in build 1 and think of it in build 2 and say, okay, now it really belongs in build 1 because of this and that. So you've got that, and you could break up the builds into sprints and go on from there. And then after that, essentially, you end up creating your project plan from that increment diagram and from the deliverables. You go back and forth and create a project plan. It can be in Excel, it can be a Microsoft project, but one of the things that we talked about in the last meeting was, regardless of what you do in Microsoft project, don't present it in meetings using that tool. It's just not easy to understand for a lot of people, and it's just confusing. And they'll look away and then they'll stop listening. So if you look at P3, Papa 3 on the media in Twitter, Papa 2 and Papa 1, I gave you examples of presentations and how you should do it. Now, P1, you can get more creative with that. I think P2 is darn good because it's just all completely visual. If you can make it more visual, do it. And then the notes. Why do we do the notes? Because things, as the project goes along, you learn things from experience during the project. And if you learn something that everybody needs to know, you put it in the notes. My notes started as, let's say 5 notes and ended up with 3 different slides of notes. Anything. And my example I used, let's just say you're moving a data center and people are in the data center and they have coffee and they're bringing their food in there. Well, the next meeting before the next move, it's in the notes. No food or drinks allowed. So now they can plan for that, and they're not going to go in there until they finish their coffee in the morning and and their donuts. So that is an overview of the other episodes and what we talked about. So let's talk about, on this particular episode, I don't think you'll need Twitter anymore. I don't think I'll refer to the diagrams. The philosophy for a project manager, how they should be thinking, and how they should manage, and what leadership is about in project management. So we'll start with that. First, there is no chain of command if you're a project manager. You need to go to anybody in the company that will help you or is part of the project and has something to do to get things done, to complete the project. You're a project manager. You don't work for anybody else but your direct boss. But if he's smart, he won't micromanage, or if she's smart, she won't micromanage you, and you should just go and get things done. So I'll call anybody in a company, from the CEO down. I'll set up a meeting with anybody in the company from the CEO down. It doesn't make a difference. Your job is to get that project done, right? Regardless of who you have to talk to or how it gets done. You've got to be, a bulldog. Just go in there and, whoever you have to contact, you contact, talk to whoever you have to get that job done. If you have to go over somebody's head, you just do it. Remember, you're not here to win a popularity contest. You're here to win hearts and minds, but that's through leadership. And we'll talk about that soon. So let's talk about some of the people in the project. Depending on how big the project is, you're going to have people who just do their everyday job and they take it in stride, and as it goes, no big deal. Then you're going to have the opposite, people who are afraid of everything. They're afraid to do something, afraid to make decisions. And I can tell you that you should know by now that nobody changes. So they'll be like that during the whole project. So let them lean on you and give them confidence by always reassuring them that, you've got things under control and everything is working well. And of course, you've got to believe that, and that will give them confidence. But some people will never stop being afraid. But just keep rowing the boat. Remember David Farragut's famous words, damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead. And that should be your attitude, full speed ahead, regardless of what happens, regardless of any incidents that should occur or, any problems that should arise. Essentially, damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead. Don't let anything faze you. Don't let anything stop you. Your end goal is the end state of that project, and that's the end state that you determined when you were doing the scope diagram. The scope diagram, should actually say in there what the end state is, or you should be able to determine it from that, and you should write it down when all of this is delivered. Or when a combination of all these deliverables result in this deliverable, that's the end of my project. That's it. There may be other things that have to be done that are associated with your project, but that's not your project. Remember, that's not your project at all. So make sure you've got that scope down pat, because that can make a big difference on whether or not you're successful. So let's talk about the core team. You've got the core team and the project team. What is the core team? The core team are those people that you meet with every single day on the project and determine what you're doing today, what you're doing tomorrow. You plan for the future. You work out problems. You fix things. So obviously you're on the core team. Your documentation specialist, the person who does the minutes and takes the notes, is on your core team. It'd be nice to have a scheduler. That person would be on your core team. It'd be nice to have an assistant project manager. You don't have them on all the projects, but the big ones you do, because when you go on leave, someone has to keep running the project, right? So far, you, documentation specialist, a scheduler, an assistant project manager. Next, on the core team, should be the SMEs, right? The folks who are experts in the particular field you're working on. If it's a networking project, the network engineer. If it's a software implementation project, the experts in the software. If it's an off-the-shelf product, the experts in actually installing that product should be on your project, on your core team. And a communication specialist should be on your core team. The person who writes the communications or is in the communications department of the agency or the company should have that person on your core team. So now you can communicate with the agency or the company professionally through the channels they've already developed. You've got your SME, your subject matter expert. You've got your documenter, you've got your scheduler, your assistant project manager. There's your core team. You're the folks that meet every single day. You work together full-time every day to get the project done. You plan things, you fix problems, you work out problems. Your project team is going to be with all the main stakeholders. So, of course, when you have a meeting, all your core team is there, and then you have all the main stakeholders, all the different folks in all the different departments who are in the scope of the project and have to do work for the project. That's your project team. That should be once a week meeting once things get going. And that should be steady. So you have your daily scrum with your core team, and could be some folks from the project team, some stakeholders, but you got to decide. Every project is different. Just use your common sense. Same way I told you, with the reports, use your common sense. I do the scope diagram, and this is the first time in this particular project I'm working on now that I added another bubble to keep track of something for this particular project. It is not in any of the other scope diagrams I've ever done, but again, use your common sense and adapt, improvise. So anytime you see an opportunity to organize better or to, see things, allow everybody else to see things better, do it. None of this is fixed, so a lot of it's common sense. Of course, the scope diagram should be fixed. You got to do that. The work breakdown structure should be fixed. The stakeholder list should be fixed. And then, the increment diagram, when you get to that, the quality check between the scope and the work breakdown structure, that's all fixed. But anytime you see an opportunity to add something that'll help you organize better or convey the message better or get everybody on one page, do it. Just do it. So the core team, we talked about it already. We talked about the project team. But let's just a couple more things about the core team, then we'll talk about leadership. So the core team, these are people you have to trust. If there's someone you don't trust or don't know or causes problems, they cannot be on your core team. Get somebody else, figure something else, or do without them. These are people you're going to discuss problems that come up in the project. You're going to discuss them with them and figure out how to solve them, right? And some of the problems may be people. So you're going to discuss people, and that's why this is a core team you have to trust. Not on every project there aren't people that'll give you problems, but they do pop up. On one of the projects I had two, we talked about how to solve it and how to work with it, and then we executed those things and it worked. Some people will never change. Some people are going to be a problem the whole project. Just let them say what they want and go on. Remember, everybody else on the entire project team, all the stakeholders, when you're having a meeting, everybody else knows that person is a problem and isn't acting in a nice way or the right way. Everybody knows it. So don't let it affect you. Don't change your voice and don't get emotional about any of it. Just nod, okay, and go on. You may have to ignore what they say sometimes, but go on. So that core team is somebody, is a group of folks that you trust and you need to work with, and you adapt with them. You customize things with them. You figure out the approach that you're going to take for all the problems that come up. That's your core team. So that's why it's different than the project team and the meeting with everybody else. Your core team is who you get together with on a daily basis to figure out strategy and tactics and all that. Let's move on to leadership. So what's leadership? Different than management, right? You're managing the project, you're managing the schedules, you're managing, all the meetings and all that. And leadership is different. So leadership is where you set the example, and leadership is where you trust people, correct? So here's some of the things that'll make you a good leader. Do not micromanage. If you're a micromanager, don't do project management. You're going to give folks heartaches and problems, and you're not going to make their life easy during the project. Don't be a micromanager. You don't need to be on all the meetings. So I'll give you some examples. I had, projects where I have 2 or 3 meetings at the same time. So the people on the core team, they led those meetings and they came back with the results. The people on your team are adults. Treat them like adults and don't micromanage. You don't do everything. If you have a documentation specialist who builds PowerPoint diagrams and can do the scope diagram and do the bubbles and move it, let them do it. I have an example of once someone needed some help, so I lent them my documentation specialist, my scheduler, and they went to help them. And instead of letting the documentation specialist and the scheduler do the work, my 2 guys watched that project manager do the work. Couldn't let go. So don't be a micromanager. Let adults do adult work and trust them. That is a quality of a good leader. We started this podcast talking about the Marines. That's the way we train. So a platoon has 3 squads, and each squad leader is out on his own when they're out there, when they're deployed on the front. And they have to make their own decisions. The platoon leader is in the back. And the platoon leader is leading the 3 squads, but when they come up to something, the squad leader has to make their own decision. When your people on the core team are out there, let them make their own decisions. Let them make decisions. Let them hold meetings. Let them do all that. That is a sign of a good leader. And a good leader also, we talked about earlier, keeps rowing that boat no matter what happened, keeps pushing hard no matter what happened. You're setting the example for everybody on your team. So leadership is setting the example for folks, trusting them because they're adults to do a job. And the only time you jump in is if something goes wrong or if they ask for help. Otherwise, you can get a project done a lot faster if you let the people on your core team do different jobs. When I have a communication specialist on my core team, he's on all the meetings. I say, okay, we're going to put something out. Yeah. Okay, let me know when you got the draft. And once we see the draft and we approve it, and I don't show the draft to the whole project team, all the stakeholders. There's no time for that. You imagine how long that would take for everybody to want it their way? So you've got to make decisions as a leader too, and you got to say, no, I'll put it out like this. If you make a mistake, you make a mistake and you move on. But once the communication specialist does the draft, we read it, the core team reads it, yeah, it's good, it's good. Sometimes I just read it, yeah, it's good, go with it. Go with it. Once I say go with it, that's it. I'm not even part of the process. I had one project where we had to do a bunch of acquisitions. And I asked one of the core team members, hey, I need somebody to do all the acquisitions on the project. Can you handle it? He said, absolutely yes. That was it. It's the last time I spoke with him about acquisitions, the last time I spoke with him about the process, the last time I looked at anything that he did. He did all the acquisitions for the project, from A to Z. I never had to look at it, never had to get involved, nothing. I gave him credit for it, I praised him for it, and I did all that. So that is a good leader. Let the people do their job. And then a good leader also, at the end of the project, that good leader will write commendations for the folks on his core team and anybody involved with the project that did an outstanding job over and beyond what they're supposed to do. So you need to write commendations for everybody in your core team. Now, of course, if there are folks that don't do a good job or slow down the project or don't do the work, don't write them a commendation. But the people who do a great job on your project, go the extra mile, you need to take the time to write a commendation for each one of them. And I've done that every single project. And people don't forget that, but they deserve that. They deserve that for doing a great job. I've also done it for stakeholders. In other words, they weren't even on the core team, but they did such a good job with their part of the scope that I wrote them commendations as well. You write the commendation and you send it to their supervisor, their boss, and that's it. And people, truly appreciate that. So it's not about you. A good leader means that it's not about you. If you have leadership skills, nothing is about you. It's all about the team, the core team, the project, and the deliverables. Don't think of yourself. This is not about you, getting credit for anything. Nothing. The credit should go and you should work. That's why you write commendations, and that's why you let adults do their job. Work to give credit to these people. You should always be praising them when they do a good job. Your core team, they're the ones who get the job done. You're managing, you're leading, but they actually do the work. So give the praise to them. Give the credit to them. And that's what a good leader does. So, we've talked about that. And management is it's just organizing things and managing them. And it's good. It's being a good leader as well. So those skills, you can get thousands of books. It's the leadership skills that a lot of people don't talk about. And the main thing in leadership is looking after your people first. They come first, you come last. So you've got to understand that. And make sure you praise them and make sure you write those commendations. So that's it. That's it for this episode 6. We talked about the philosophy of project management. And hope you all have a great rest of the day or a weekend whenever you're listening to this. And again, thanks for listening. Everybody take care. Thank you.